April 30th, 2026, 7 in the morning. The city of Perm in the industrial heart of Russia wakes up to the sound of consecutive explosions. 1, 2, 3, 4 gigantic oil tanks explode one after another. The largest refinery in the entire Ural region starts to burn. A column of black smoke rises so high that NASA's satellites pick up the trail from 130 kilometers away. The city's loudspeakers blare out a chemical emergency warning. The population is instructed to close their windows and drink only boiled water. Universities close, public transportation stops, the airport cancels flights, and the entire city starts looking for an answer to a simple question. How, in the year 2026, with all of Russia's air defenses, was this possible? The answer is the most incredible part of this story. What happened in Perm that morning didn't start that morning. It started the night before. And to understand the scale of this, first we need to look at a map. More than 1,500 kilometers in a straight line. To give you an idea, that's more than the distance between two entire European countries. That's the distance the Ukrainian drone flew to blow up that refinery. Perm is located in the middle of the Urals, a mountain range that divides European Russia from Siberia. And the Urals are not just any region. In 1941, when Hitler's tanks were sweeping across the Soviet Union, Stalin made a decision that changed the course of the war. He dismantled more than 1,500 entire factories and sent them all behind the Urals. It was Russia's stronghold, the sacred sanctuary out of reach of Nazi bombers. For 85 years, no one has gotten there. Not during the Cold War, not during the Chechen War, not in the 4 years of the current war. But in March of this year, the Secretary of the Russian Security Council, Sergei Shoigu, said something no one expected to hear from a Russian general. In his words, the Urals, which until recently were out of reach, are now already in the immediate threat zone. No region of Russia can consider itself safe. And a month later, Perm was burning. But why this refinery specifically? Well, there are 3 reasons. First, the size. Lukoil Permnefteyorg Syntez produces 13 million tons of fuel per year. Gasoline, diesel, aviation kerosene. It's one of the largest in Russia. Second, its military use. Everything that comes out of there supplies the Kremlin's war machine. The tanks that fire at the Ukrainians, the trucks that take troops to Donbass, the jets that bomb Kiev, everything goes through that refinery. Third, and here's the detail that Russia doesn't like to admit, to keep operating and modernizing, the refinery depends on Western technology. In January 2022, Lukoil had just signed a contract with the American company Honeywell to install new equipment in the complex. But the war started a month later. The sanctions came into effect. And today, Russia simply has no way to replace the parts or get technical support. Something about this attack really stands out, because it was smarter than it seems. The Ukrainians didn't just target any spot inside the refinery, they aimed for its heart, a unit called AVT-4. Think of it as the main gateway to the factory. All the crude oil that arrives goes through it before becoming fuel, and it accounts for almost 40% of the refinery's total capacity. When it stops, the operation halts. What the Ukrainians destroyed could take more than a year to repair, if it ever gets repaired. And as if that wasn't enough, the night before they hit another target just a few kilometers away. A Transneft pumping station which distributes Russian oil to 4 different ports. On 2 consecutive nights, the Ukrainians cut 2 links of the same chain. Surgical. Do you know what weapon did that? It almost seems like a joke. The drone is called Lyuty, which in Ukrainian means fierce, and each one costs about $200,000. The engine is German, it costs $5,000, and it's sold freely. It has a fiberglass fuselage, weighs 200 kilograms, and can fly up to 2,000 kilometers without needing GPS because it has an internal navigation system that works without any external signal. Even if the Russians try to blind the drone with electronic warfare, it stays on the right course. The attack was carried out by the Alpha unit of the SBU, the Ukrainian intelligence service. The same team that sank Russian ships in the Black Sea hit the MiG-31 fighter jet in Crimea and blew up platforms in the Caspian. They programmed each drone with more than 1,000 waypoints to avoid Russian radars and hit the target precisely. The commander of the Ukrainian Unmanned Systems Forces, Robert Brovdy, known by the codename Magyar, gave an interview to the BBC a few days before the attack on Perm. And he said something that is frightening. That 1,500 to 2,000 kilometers inside Russian territory is no longer a peaceful rear area, that the Ukrainian bird flies wherever and whenever it wants. It seemed like a provocation at the time, but it was a warning, and the drone, as incredible as it is not the most surreal part of this story. The first thing the residents of Perm saw was a white cloud, shaped like a mushroom, rising on the horizon. Then came the black smoke, and after that, the city's loudspeakers started playing a message in Russian. There had been an accident with the release of a dangerous substance. A resident told the Moscow Times newspaper that the instructions were clear. Do not leave your homes, close all the windows, drink only boiled water. But the worst was yet to come. Within a few hours, videos started circulating on Telegram showing something that looked like it was straight out of a horror movie. Black drops falling from the sky, oily stains on cars, on white clothes, on windows. The Russian press nicknamed the phenomenon oil rain. And the Russian opposition journalist Sergei Ukov, who runs the channel Perm 36.6, said a phrase that went viral. The city is in absolute terror and the local authorities have lost control. But the most bizarre part was yet to come. The governor of Perm, Dmitry Makonin, went to the press and officially said that all of that was a test, that there was no chemical threat, that the alarm had been a scheduled exercise. The residents were filming the explosions and the governor said everything was fine. And, while Perm was burning, something very strange was happening in Moscow. It's worth taking a closer look at what Vladimir Putin did in the 48 hours following the attack, because each step he took tells part of the story. It starts with the local governor. In the first hours after the explosions, he appears on television and says that the chemical alarm had been a scheduled drill. He lies straight to the residents' faces while the city is still covered in smoke. He spends the entire first day, and not a word comes out of the Kremlin. No official statement about Perm. No promise of retaliation. No visit from the president. No video, no statement. Absolute silence. It was only when the second day began that Putin finally picked up the phone. But it wasn't to speak to the Russian people. It was to call Donald Trump. More than an hour and a half of conversation. And for the first time in 4 years of war, he proposed a truce. And what a coincidence. Right around May 9th, the Victory Parade, the most sacred date on the Russian calendar. A few hours later, the Kremlin released another announcement that no one expected. The May 9th parade in Moscow will take place without tanks, without missiles, without fighter jets, for the first time in 19 years. The official justification? The threat of drones. And, to close out those 48 hours, came the blow that the Kremlin didn't expect. The Russian military bloggers themselves, people like Alexander Kotz and the channel military informant who always defended the government, began to openly attack the Russian air defense. And the Belarusian newspaper Nasaniva even wrote that it seems there is no more anti-aircraft defense in the Urals. And do you know what's even stranger? While all this was happening, Putin didn't say a single word about Perm. This kind of silence coming from someone who invaded Ukraine promising to restore Russian military glory is the clearest sign that something has broken. And the numbers show the extent of the damage. In just 4 months, Russia lost $7 billion in oil revenue, according to Zelensky himself. The output of Russian refineries has plummeted to its lowest level in 16 years, according to Bloomberg. At least 5 major refineries are shut down, and the Kremlin was forced to even ban gasoline exports to avoid running out of fuel at home. But perhaps the most serious sign of all comes from within the Russian system itself. An economic institute linked to the Kremlin has halved Russia's growth forecast for this year. Anyone who has been following that economy for a while knows that when the Russians themselves start to admit that something went wrong, it's because it's already gone too far. Look at the paradox of history. In 1941, Stalin hid the industrial heart of Russia behind the Urals to escape Nazi bombings. It worked for 85 years. On April 30th, 2026, a $200,000 Ukrainian drone. With a $5,000 German engine, crossed 1,500 kilometers of Russian airspace and set fire to exactly that sanctuary. As Major General Kamara from the Security Service of Ukraine said, and this phrase sums it all up, "The enemy no longer has a secure rear. Distance no longer guarantees protection." As you can see, Perm was not just another attack. It was the attack that made it clear that the myth of Putin as the protector of Russia is over. And he knows it. That's why he disappeared. That's why he called Trump and cut the tanks from the parade. That's why the silence. And that's where I'd like to hear your opinion. How long do you think Putin will be able to sustain this situation? Write in the comments what you think. And if you like this straightforward analysis, leave a like and subscribe to the channel. Here we keep following the war in a way the mainstream media doesn't show. See you next time.